Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 6 of the Asian Training Championships. In opening government, we have Delhi University 1. In opening opposition, we have IUB 1. In closing government, we have IUT 1. And in closing opposition, we have the North University 2. In panel with me, I have Shikil Hassan and Nafiz Ahmed. I am a chair, Skanda, and on the motion that this House believes that feminists should campaign for fathers' rights, I would like to open the floor to the Prime Minister. It's not idle time this way, so if you need a minute count, just let me know.
I'd like a minute count. Will you do me a favor and hold up your photograph so I won't be able to see it? Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This House believes that feminists should campaign for fathers' rights. As opening government, we will first define to you what we think the feminist ideology stands for. We will tell you a historical background as to how this ideology has developed and what this cause, what the objective of this cause is. We will then, what we seek to prove, the main theme of our debate is that fathers' rights is a particular aspect which is currently going unnoticed, but if it were to be recognized and championed by the feminist cause, it would benefit them because the very objective of the feminist cause would be better achieved by campaigning for fathers' rights. Now, what am I going to tell you? Firstly, feminism, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you this ideology stands for absolute equality. It says, it believes that there should be no kind of special treatment. Women who call themselves feminists want to be given what they deserve. Nothing more, nothing less, but simply what they deserve. So if you think that a woman is less productive because she's unable to bear physical burden, then well, please go ahead and pay her like that. Do not give her special treatment for the very same, ladies and gentlemen. We tell you that the feminist cause is just about absolute equality. No scope of discrimination, no special treatment, not even if you've been discriminated in the past, not even if you're going to be discriminated in the future, no special treatment. It's completely merit-based. That's what we think the feminist ideology is, ladies and gentlemen. We give you a history then of how it started. Now take it now, sir. We tell you that it started because women were considered biologically weaker than men. And we tell you that this weakness, this biological weakness, because it's a physicality, it's very visible. It's visible that a woman will not be able to maybe walk with as much stamina, with as much zest, maybe 8 floors all the way to the 8th floor, ladies and gentlemen. But a man most certainly will. These are visible things that society, when it started building these stereotypes, when it started building these sociological constructs, it looked around to build them. And what it got from looking around was that women weren't able to do physical labor as much. The conclusion of this observation was that women are biologically weaker, ladies and gentlemen. We then tell you that this biological weakness transcended into a sociological construct which is women are generally weaker. We think that's problematic, but we think that is problematic. We don't want to ascribe blame here or there, but we simply tell you that the feminist cause doesn't want to ascribe blame. What it does want to do is simply start from the very beginning, so they are able to prove themselves as not being weaker, socially or biologically, ladies and gentlemen. An example of how this weakness we think has translated into other spheres is how, for example, when a woman is supposed to, a man can't carry, when a man and woman get out of, let's say, a train, the man carries the bags, but the woman doesn't, ladies and gentlemen. So what we end up saying, what we end up psychologically thinking, subconsciously, what we end up internalizing is that women should be put in a situation where they are slightly more productive, or that at least they aren't as good as the man is, ladies and gentlemen. So we tell you that these are the subtle psychological transactions that have happened, translating that biological weakness into the sociological spheres, ladies and gentlemen. Then discrimination started happening, and I completely agree. It's been happening over ages and ages. Civilizations have gone on discriminating against women, and what modern civilization has done in order to compensate those 1,000 years of discrimination is granting extra rights and extra privileges, ladies and gentlemen. But this special treatment to compensate something that's been done in the past. Feminists believe that the compensation will not come by putting them at a stool to compete with the man, ladies and gentlemen. Feminists believe that they will automatically earn their rights, staying small, being shorter in height, ladies and gentlemen, but still being able to reach as much as a man can in the sphere of life. We then tell you, let's look at the biological differences, ladies and gentlemen, because we tell you that, because at the crux of our case is that it's the biological differences that has triggered this. We tell you that in the case of father's rights, especially in the case of biological reproductive rights, the father has a huge disadvantage. We tell you biological differences can be of two types. One is of course physical weakness, okay, and the second one is the birth labor. There is a woman goes through the phenomena of birth, ladies and gentlemen. In the physical weakness, in the area of physical biological weakness, physically speaking, we tell you that the weakness is more apparent. But in the case of reproductive rights, the discrimination is far more apparent, ladies and gentlemen, because, and I'll give you examples here. A man isn't consulted by a woman before she gets an abortion. He's completely left out of the picture. He's nowhere in that picture, ladies and gentlemen. So we tell you that the discrimination in the case of reproductive rights is far more apparent, while the weakness is apparent in the case of physical weakness. We tell you that the focus is, and the reason why we don't want to focus on the physical weakness and we want to give slightly more weightage to reproductive rights is because it's really not as relevant anymore, because women have developed, our society has developed such that the competing level, the level at which men and women compete in the sociological sphere has moved from being physical labor to being that intellectual one. And women don't possess any less intellect, so it's lesser apparent, but still quite feelably there, ladies and gentlemen. However, in the case of birth rights, it's completely it's sort of like an unapproachable area for the man, ladies and gentlemen. And we tell you, now that we've established the premise, we're going to tell you, let's look at the father's rights under three contexts. We tell you, maybe at the time of conception, that is, the gender lifestyle of a man is that he's going to get married, then he's going to conceive a child, and then hopefully he won't get divorced, but will consider divorce anyway. Now, at the time of conception, look at the sort of rights that the father has. He has next to no say as to whether or not, in fact, he can't even force a woman to wear a particular sort of, to have a particular sort of birth control. In fact, a woman can start birth control without at all consulting the man. So even conception isn't even in his hands, ladies and gentlemen. I told you earlier that abortion isn't in his hands. He can abort a child without the consent of the woman. She can abort a child without the consent of the man. During life, ladies and gentlemen, during the subsistence of a marriage, in most family law cases, if you look at the family law, personal law all over the world, especially in Hindu law, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that the man is considered, is in fact legally ascribed the position of a provider as well as a protector. We tell you that a man cannot quit his job simply because he doesn't want to work anymore, because the government thinks that as long as a man has all his hands and feet intact, he is able-bodied and alive and should be working. Those standards are not upheld for a woman, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, what we're trying to tell you is that even in divorce, ladies and gentlemen, custodial rights, women are automatically considered the appropriate and more relevant guardian of the child. Even in alimony, women get maintenance. Why should a man get maintenance, ladies and gentlemen? So why is it that the feminists should champion this cause, the most important part of this debate? We tell you that if you look at it a little clearly, right now discrimination is perceived as a one-way street. Men discriminate against women, ladies and gentlemen. So when the feminist cause takes up, when women take up the cause of father's rights, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you what's going to happen is that they're going to be seen as someone who is sympathetic to the other side, and we see the fact that there are other rights to be recognized.
I find that speaker from the ground to open case to the opposition. I call upon the opposition. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about on the opposition side, we think there's a very first lack of clear definition from the side of the opening government. We see completely, we concede with the fact that they're trying to solve a problem. What sort of problems they're trying to solve? The discrimination. The women are being treated inequally. So that's why they're trying to promote the equality, the absolute objective. So right now, they're talking about father. We don't really understand why you're talking about the women and the other man. The very next second, you're talking about father. How exactly it's going to link back to your proposal? We seem to see no clear link between them, because fathers are not really looking for their rights. They're not being discriminated in any way. So that's why we think it's completely absurd and preposterous idea propagated by the opening government in the very first place. Secondly, if the father or the male chauvinist idea is being so inherent and so prevalent, why are we really focusing on that very particular idea where the feminists are really looking for absolute equality when they have not achieved the equality in the very first place? So that's the focus we really need to focus on at this very moment. Our focus should be on to the achieving that very goal. So since the goal has not been achieved, we should not clearly shift our focus to some other aspects in order to maintain an extra burden. So that's the added burden we probably not really cannot afford in this very moment, not now. So secondly, why do you think the talking about abortion is not really thinkable over here? We think that's a very fundamental reason for couple of responses going to. Firstly, we think when an abortion takes place, when the woman takes a decision that 9 months entire atrocity or all this sort of like the pregnancy times burden, she is not willing to take it. That's because her body and bodily autonomy and all her functions are dependent upon her. So that's why we think father don't have to take a burden on that particular time because he can move easily. He doesn't have to take an extra burden on that very moment. Because the physical burden or the mental burden is not upon him. He can really move easily whatever he wants to do. But the normal woman cannot do anything because she is a mother. She's going to be a mother at the very end of the day. So that's why she has to take extra and special care upon him. So that's why we think it's fundamentally asymmetry when you're talking about and when you're comparing the rights between women and men on the notion of abortion. It's completely absurd from their side. And thirdly, they talk about the birthright and conception of the father's right, that it is perceived to be protected, perceived to be provided. First of all, we see that's a clear definition is being said, but this is the role play is being defined. It's not an inequality, it's a biological difference that has already been conceded. That's the role play has been defined from the very inherent, it's been embedded in the human race, right? So fathers and mothers have different role play. It cannot be assimilated in the very table, and we can really quantify that very right to be actually and can be similar, can be symmetric, can be treated in a similar fashion. So that's why we think it's also not valid idea from their side of the house. So first, the construct is going to be brought about by me is going to be the basically two basic reasons. Why do we think that the feminists should not have been shifting their focus onto the father's right or whatever the rights they're trying to talk about? And secondly, why do we think that right, how to quantify the right is an arbitrary idea? So first off, why do you think the primary objective of the feminists, they have already considered the fact that their objective is to achieve the equality? How are we going to do that? Firstly, they're trying to talk about the father's right is going to be achieved, and they should campaign about it. How are we really going to do that? We don't see any idea. How are we really campaigning about that? What sort of rights are we talking about for the father? Right? Are we really talking about that in the abortion time? We should have the consent of father. That has already been talked about. That is not needed up till now because the father don't have the accountability. Fathers don't have the credibility to answer on that very moment because we think it's not necessary to have the consent from the father's side because the entire burden is completely upon the girl. She is taking the decision on behalf of her. That's what we think is completely feasible for the girl to take care of. That's what we think the father's consent on that very right is not applicable. What sort of inequality we are talking about, right?
Sir, don't you think this is precisely the hypocrisy that the feminist movement needs to shy away from? That a woman can dictate complete rights over in one area, but at the same time says, I don't want certain special treatment. She's getting species special treatment in one area. Why should she get the same in the other? That's inconsistent with the philosophy.
No, this is not inconsistent because we think there's already as we talked about. The role play is completely been defined from the very innate reason is inhibited by the human race. Women cannot go to war. That's the very first idea we are not providing from our side of the house. Women can go to war when you want, when you try to them to, but it's not the reason that we need to focus on the equality needs to be treated up here by providing them the wartime facilities or all of this atrocity is going to be based upon by that woman. But rather we think from the very inherent reason from the historical artifact. We're seeing the men have gone there. That's not the inequality we're trying to talk about. It's the reason that how the human race has been progressing on. That's what we think is completely justified on our side of the house. So what sort of rights have been talking about? The quantification, the quantifying, or any sort of idea or the mechanism they have been talked about. Second concept is going to be brought about by this. Like when you talk about the quantifying rights, what sort of rights have been talking about have not been clarified. If the father will be discriminated, on the other hand, they're trying to talk about that the women is being discriminated and we need to do something about it. So you are saying the women should not be treated equally, women should not be treated in special manner, rather we should focus on father. So how exactly it's consistent to your idea? Because at the end of the day, you are saying that we should not treat anyone in a special manner, because I think the equality is the very basis of our idea, and now you're treating the father in a different special manner, and you are saying that's consistent from your idea. That's completely preposterous, because it's not solving their objective, it's not solving their anything, it's not giving them any proper link, so that's why we think it's invalidating their proposition to begin with. So whatever we're trying to propose from our side of the house, that you don't have any sort of determinant factor that you are going to propose from this side of the house that we're going to achieve this. They haven't didn't clearly draw any line whatsoever that we're going to draw this line onto this parameter, that this is how we're going to achieve this, and that's how we're going to solve the problem. They haven't clarified any problem whatsoever. If there is a problem, they have problem with their own ideas that women needs to be reaching their equality. On the other hand, when they're saying that we should focus on the father side, that's an invalidating idea, because that's contradicting their own principle. And secondly, when the father is being treated in a special manner that they're trying to campaign on, that's also an invalidating proposition, because the fathers don't need any sort of discrimination, fathers don't need any special treatment right now, because the fathers are right now on their hand. This is the dominant entity up here. So as a whole, the opposition side have been arguing about the whole right. There's no justified proposition being brought by the governing government.
I can say the opposition speech when the government is accountable.
Right, Mr. Speaker, before we go on further into this debate, there are two definitions that need to be clarified. First is what is special manner, and second, what is ordinary manner. We believe that special manner and ordinary manner cannot be judged with status quo. Therefore, if currently we are proposing that men should get higher rights, that is not special manner. And therefore, ordinary manner is not what is being done now. Special manner is if someone has higher rights over the other, and ordinary manner is both have equal rights. Therefore, when we are saying that there is special treatment to one side, we mean that one side has greater rights. It does not mean that under status quo one has special rights. Therefore, status quo is special manner. Now, having clarified that, let's look at what this side of the house came up here and said. The first thing they said was abortion. We want to clarify that this debate is not about abortion. This is about whether or not feminists should campaign for abortion rights for men. But even if this debate was about abortion, we believe that in abortion there is some part that the man is contributing to. He will have to live with the fact that he had a child along his life and he could not kill it. Therefore, we believe that there is still some consent required from the man's side. Therefore, there is a scope for rights from the man's side. The second thing they came up here and said was that father and mother have different roles and therefore must be treated differently. We believe that this is the same sort of gender stigma that is engraved in our society, that parents are different. This is the sort of gender neutrality which we haven't been able to achieve. That actors and actresses, fathers and mothers are different and they cannot be treated as just parents and just actors. The cause of the feminists is to bring about this gender neutrality, that gender is not a factor in anything that you pursue and that anything that you do should be independent of your gender, ladies and gentlemen. The third thing they came up here and said that women cannot go to war. We believe that that is changing today's times. We have police officers coming up as women. We have district attorneys coming up as women. We have Israel was an entire squad of women, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that since all of this situation is changing and they are coming up as truck drivers and auto drivers, we believe that since this construct is changing, that there is scope for women to achieve that equality for men. And the feminist cause is to bring about this equality. It is not if women are here to bring them here. It is also if men are here and women are here and they uplift that to an equal platform, ladies and gentlemen. The feminist cause is incomplete if it focuses only on women's rights and on the special treatment, we believe that it would be hypocrisy from the feminists to say that they have higher rights at one level but lower rights at another level, ladies and gentlemen. What this means is that if the feminist cause is of equal rights, then they do not deserve special treatment that is higher rights in one area, which we believe currently is the father's rights area, or the reproductive area. And therefore, if they want to be taken seriously, if they want to be shown as brave, as one that can come up to the challenge, as one that are as strong as men are, then they must equate that sort of behavior, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, they must actively fight from the other side as well. Yes, sir.
Sure. The rights which you have stated was partially. Don't you think that this will women will not actually campaign for it because it directly harms the right of the women?
Sit down, sir. This is the point, that women need to give up this hypocrisy that we deserve special treatment somewhere else. If they want to be seen as credible, or they want to be seen as you must treat me seriously, any compromise, if women actively ask for rights, then they will compromise at some level for men's rights. That means an increase in the women's rights will lead to a decrease in the man's rights. So if they want that decrease, they must allow themselves to give up those rights if they want that increase, ladies and gentlemen. That means that if they want to go from 0 to +2 and bring men from 4 to 2, then they must themselves also allow that sort of change in a different area, in a different sphere, ladies and gentlemen. We also think that this brings up ancillary benefits and ancillary ideas, ladies and gentlemen, analogous to the British fighting for India's independence, as is the case in AOU. When this sort of thing happened, or when the whites championed for blacks' rights, ladies and gentlemen, what this shows is that the problem is only not from one side, or the problem is not a perceivable problem from one gender, or one that is equal from both genders, ladies and gentlemen. When women campaign for men's rights, they not only show that they are the ones who deserve rights in some sphere, but they are the ones who are championing equality and absolute equality, ladies and gentlemen. It's a principle of justice. Those who seek equity must do equity, ladies and gentlemen. That means that if I am going through the justice system for seeking justice, I must do justice myself. And if I am doing injustice in any area, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the problem of discrimination, or the problem of gender discrimination till now was only perceived to be one-sided. That women were weaker and men were stronger, ladies and gentlemen. However, in reproductive rights, it's the vice versa. That men have 0 rights and women have 100% rights, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, we believe that you want to change this, and you want women to be the ones arguing for this. They also went on to say that there is no campaign, or there is no campaign for men's rights, ladies and gentlemen. We disagree with that. We believe that there are men's cells, or men actively asking for these sort of rights, ladies and gentlemen. There are no constructive arguments that side government has brought about, or side opposition has brought about, ladies and gentlemen. We also want you to say that the end of this move, what our government wants is that we do not, feminists do not want themselves to be perceived as socially weak, or someone who cannot be taken as socially inferior. We want the social treatment to be equalized. We believe that the basis of this social discrimination is biological in nature, and biologically twofold. That is, one in which you are physically weaker, and one in which you are biologically weaker. We believe that the reproductively weaker. We believe that the reproductive rights of men is something that has been ignored till now, and has made women at a higher pedestal over men, and we want to equalize this pedestal, ladies and gentlemen. We want to tell you that discrimination is both positive and negative in nature. That means positive discrimination is that when you give higher rights to someone, and negative discrimination is when you take away rights from this one. We believe that the feminist cause is not about positive discrimination, that you give us reservation or you give us special treatment. It is simply about equalizing the platform for both, ladies and gentlemen, and we believe that that must happen with the mechanism of positive and negative discrimination for both genders, and in those terms we rest.
I thank the speaker for his remarks. Now I call upon the opposition.
a wonderful lesson in statistics, and that is our first problem. Since when has it been allowed to quantify rights? Even if we are to go by according to what they're saying, the man is here and woman is here, and they're saying we should give them equality. First question, how do you bring this man over here, down here? By taking away his right? No, that is the first problem that we identify. And then they're saying the feminist movements which are here, which are trying to come up to the men's level according to their movement, is going to be stopped. So what they're basically saying is that, equalize them, but we don't really see what the point of equalizing them is and how are you exactly equalizing them in the first place. So the first question that comes up, that in a patriarchal society, and I'm very much ashamed to think that they have not looked at their India's own perspective, that in a society, in a patriarchal society, where female mutilation, baby mutilation is at such a high, where there is already a horrid use of the father's right and the father's dominant society, since when has it become okay for women to start giving away and stopping to wanting their rights? A small example like that would be efficient in that case. We look at the abortion idea, and they said that abortion fathers do not have rights. But they have constantly shown you that the burden of pregnancy, the burden of gestation, the burden of labor itself falls so heavily on a mother that on the first count, the mother should have a bigger stake. To make the mother say even bigger, you must consider that the person who is having the baby, and the autonomous idea of having the baby, has to rest on the person of the mother itself. Because while the father can go on enjoying his lifestyle, but the father can give birth and then go away and not take responsibility. The mother has to deal with it. So if a mother wants to see that at this point of time, I want to abort, I want to take this decision for my career, I want to do this because in the long run, I do not want to suffer the detrimental effect of a patriarchal society, but I want to be really good of having a baby at a young age. We see that there is a problem, and we see that we say that fathers in that case should not be involved in that very decision. Why has it become so important in this house? The reason is that they have based their case on that very idea, and they have said that even though women are having to go through a large amount of physical pain, which she would agree to, but they're saying that even if we are having a pain, even if we are disadvantaged against, our very voice to some of that disadvantage should be taken away. Now, there is another problem that should have been identified from the very first idea, is that where have we seen a protest rally for men wanting equal voting? Where have we seen protest rally for women, men having to come up and say, we want our rights? Who do they go to? Another man? Who do they want to? We haven't seen such a problem in that arena, so as to strongly suggest that this house should have the feminists stop and wanting the rights of males instead. So we're feeling that there's a problem in there. In the righteous course of trying to achieve equality, they've clearly shown that equality cannot be reached, and that the only way for them to show equality is to make father's contribution slightly heavier or slightly lower. So when you're taking that burden away, when you're having or lightening somebody else's contribution, we see that there is no amount of equality that might come here. And they've come up here and said that gender should not be a factor, but we beg to differ. Because at certain cases around the world, we've shown that gender has to have given advantages. You do not send your mother and your sister to war, not only because you think that they might be located or not, but because they have the higher chance of being paid and being taken disadvantaged against. You do not, even if you're the CEO of a person, CEO of a company is a woman, you give her the pregnancy leave. You do not say tomorrow you will be having labor, so you have to come to the office the day after. There have been situations throughout history, and it has not been done to discriminate them, but it has been done to allow them to perform at the very highest level. We have not discriminated actively against them. We have not taken them away, such as we have taken the rights. The people give the rights away to the black community. We have not done that. But we must understand that even so, doing this debate, we're doing a debate in a patriarchal society, in a society that we have not seen protests for equal rights coming from men, but from women instead. And we must answer ourselves questions that have that little nice bar graph been reached for women to give up their voices, give up their outrights. We strongly say no. And a prime example I gave you, the example of India itself, where the number of female mutilation is high in the right. Yes,
sir. Sir, don't you think that the reason why the feminist cause doesn't have any credibility now is because we are championing only one-sided rights? Don't we want an equal standard for both genders, whether we give or take from one? We want to be taken seriously only on merit and not because we're weak. Isn't that why the feminist ideology isn't credible as of right now?
There are two problems with that. You say that the good feminist campaign do not have credibility. Then where did the equal voting come from billions of years ago? And secondly, even if you're saying that we are physically dissimilar, we're physically capable, we're showing that at the end of the day the burden does fall heavier on women. So as we have to facilitate a situation in order to allow them to perform at a higher normal level. And thirdly, want to go ahead and ask for your, if you want to try on women's rights, and even if you want to say that I want women's rights, I want to go further, then why do you have to stop that and start supporting the patriarch father instead? Why do you have to bring him into the scenario and say that the fathers need the rights instead of me wanting the rights for himself? Two problems that come up with your POI again, that I'll give it to come up again. They're saying that the women's rights are shunned. They're saying that women give up their rights. They've asked the women to give up their rights. They said that we understand that we have a disadvantaged situation, so that we give up our rights. Great, give up your rights. If you want to do so, go back to your family and go on and speak about that. But why are we propagating the fathers campaigning here? What is the link between the two? How do you say that because I will propagate the father's rights, my right will go up? Hasn't that been the way that for Middle Ages, when women have consistently been disadvantaged and they were able to say something for their own needs? They have not been able to say that I want my right. And has that, in that situation, has that been achieved? We've constantly seen that has not been achieved. And that gave rise to the whole feminist movement itself. So the whole idea, what have we seen from the upper house? We've seen that the abortion case has been brought up, and we've constantly defended that. We've said that the abortion decision has to stay with the mother because of the reason that the gravity of her suffering and the importance of the decision is large, heavier with the mother than the father. And we've also shown you that in the quest for equality, they're making one side every advantage and one side every disadvantage. And thirdly, we've shown you that even if you want to start getting the equal rights as men, even if you want to take your rights as women, even if you want to give up their rights as they're suggesting, because they're saying that we do not see a link from the upper house to say that they should give up their own rights and propagate the father's ones instead. For these questions, we heavily question their motion, and we beg to vote.
I had a speaker remark that includes the opening of debate and now calling on the government.
What is the problem? And this side does not seem to understand that. Secondly, they've given some examples of how women are privileged in some manner. But we need to understand, for example, they've given the example of a CEO being pregnant but having that labor. You need to understand that women being biologically different have to be considered in some manner, because equity is what we are looking for. We need to understand that it is not biologically possible for a father to have this kind of situation, right? So we need to understand the biological differences and act accordingly. That is something that we want them to understand. They also talk about how they need, in order for women to go up to men's level, they have to, some of men's rights have to be taken away. That is not exactly true. We just need to take away some of the father's rights, or we do not need to, make women preferential so that their rights exponentially increase. But we need to acknowledge, as these feminist movements need to acknowledge that fathers have rights, and some of those are ignored. And because those are ignored, feminists would improve the situation of women in the long run if they consider some of the rights that the fathers have. So how do they improve the situation of women, different women in society, if they consider fathers' rights? And that is what we are going to show you. How will it benefit feminist future movements? Now we need to understand, what do they support? They support feminine rights, right? They support equality for women, absolute equality, true, but more of equity for women, right? To be treated equally, and that is something they propose, right? Now, sometimes this leads to some over-preference to women, right? Now, the logic of that is that in most developing societies, most women are suppressed, have been suppressed for a very long time, and that they're still suppressed, and that is the reason some of the women in society need to be given a bit more preference, because they have been suppressed for so long, and their perception needs to change. Now, they also hate the men-dominated culture and need an equitable culture, right? Which is another reason why they sometimes over-prefer some women's rights, which do not, again, go with their ideology, that we understand. that women should be a bit more than just equal in some cases, even though they're looking for absolute equality or equity. For example, there is more leniency shown for women who undergo trials because when they're blamed, because they blame the social system to push women to do something wrong. And that is, and you know, this is very subtle, and they do not realize that this is actually over-preferencing women and it's going against their philosophy. Again, I mean, look at Bangladesh, for example, or India. One of the strictest laws and punishment for abuse is there for the abuse of women, right? One of the most strictest laws. This varies from country to country because where you need to protect women more, you need to have that law, you know, more the protection more. There is more necessary because women there are in a different society, in a different paradigm. Please sit down. Now, we who empathize, the people who empathize with women, understand that it does not mean that we are giving women more preference. People who empathize understand that it does not mean that we are giving women more preference. But people who do not empathize do not think so, right? All this is working right now. This feminist movement is working right now because some society actually empathizes or sympathizes with women. But in most developing societies, some or most of the parts of society think them as sexist and more appropriately chauvinists, right? And this perception that they're sexist or chauvinist, right? You know, these kind of people are not low in number; they're huge in number, and their perception is very strong. And their views are not going to vanish that easily, or you know, in a very short time. There will always be people like that in society. Now, in current scenario, this sexist movement is working because some of society empathizes with women. But the problem is the perception in which feminist movements is mostly looked at in these kind of developing societies. And here is the problem, that they are seen as chauvinists or sexist. If this goes on, then in future the movement will not have enough effect, and that is a fact. Because when you're perceived as something which is not fair to both parties, right, it might not achieve satisfactory results in the end. Because whatever you're proposing or whatever you're propagating or promoting, as sexist movement is not perceived as propagators of equality, even though we understand who empathize with women, know that yes, it propagates equality or equity. It is not perceived by most of society, in developing society, that as propagators of equality, because they think that they're over-preferring women, right? Thus, it harms the credibility that they are a just movement. It harms that credibility of their justness, right? And they are susceptible to be ignored in future in these developing societies, which is not something that we want, and it is crucial for them to not be ignored, but they will be ignored if this sexist perception remains. And I'll be explaining more to that and showing you how, if they are going to start to fight for fathers' rights, how to improve them. But before that,
however you read your life, you start your own right, giving up the movement itself and looking for and campaigning for fathers' rights.
So you need to understand that the statement that you need to give up your own right in order to fight for fathers' right is wrong. Why? Because when you fight for fathers' right, it will actually benefit you, as I'm just going to show you. If they start to go for fathers' right? For example, in Bangladesh, right, the custody of kids after a divorce is more lenient towards a mother because mothers do not actually live alone. They go back to their family after a divorce, and kids are actually kept under the custody of a mother in most cases. And courts actually give this leniency or this preference to women in this case because they think kids would grow better under a woman. Now, this kind of things, if they start to propagate that no, fathers also have the right to vote, and then mothers do not need to be preferred. These kind of subtle rights, if they start to propagate, it not only gives them credibility in developing societies, where perception matters in developing societies, it sends a positive message which might decrease women abuse in the future in developing societies. It might cause the decrease of women abuse as fathers or men in the society engage with feminists, which is now not present. This engagement of men, of fathers with feminists is extremely necessary for the views and perceptions to change, because men's views now get directly shared with the champions of women's rights. Now, this view needs to be shared, and this engagement is absolutely necessary. As just lawmaking, which the feminists are now doing, that they make stricter laws for protecting women, this is just not going to work. This is not the end of the debate. They need to engage directly with women, and this is the first step, going towards fathers. This only not improves father-mother relationship, this not only improves the mother and father relationship, this also improves the father and daughter relationship in terms of understanding what are the daughter's rights from the father's point of view, right? And that relation increases. When that increases, we see that fathers and men become more aware of the rights in developing societies of what women actually need and what women actually want. And that is how we see that in the end, it is actually helping women in developing societies to achieve equality and not the youth. So why do we vote? We vote because we think that it is better for women at the end of the day if they support fathers' rights. And that's why feminists should support that way.
I thank the speaker for his remarks, and I now call upon the member of the opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me the floor today. Now, most of that has been raised in the House. This House believes that feminists should campaign for fathers' rights. Now, what we've understood from the government side is that they clearly do not understand what the fundamentals of feminist theory are, firstly, and secondly, they really do not understand about the inherent need that they have failed to characterize why there's an inherent need for women, so for feminists strictly, to actually fight for our father's rights. Now, before I move on to my two principal extensions that I will present in this House, first some rebuttals. The government side, both government sides, at least the closing government, had actually rehashed most of whatever the opening government said. Now, moving on to the rebuttals, they've talked about how how fathers need to be given equal rights, how there needs to be a curbing of women's rights to make sure that they are on equal platforms. We do not believe so. Firstly, the fundamentals of feminist theory, if you look at the works of Virginia Woolf, look at the works of Alice Walker, it's about changing the attitude towards women, Mr. Speakers. It's about giving them fundamental rights in society. Because this is completely exclusive of bodily autonomy. Do not take it, sir. Because when they talk about father does not have a consented abortion, let us not forget, if say the woman wants to, if the mothers want to go, do not want to go for abortion, but the abortion is actually, it's going to have a very adverse effect on her health, and the father believes that no, that you should not go for this, abortion. So you should go for this abortion. Then we believe that father's consent is taken into that account. So we do not see how there is a need for a separate campaigning for fathers' rights. Because in the current status quo, we do not see fathers coming up and talking about, well, you know what, we want equal rights. We want rights to be given to us. Not taken, sir. We do not see any uprising whatsoever. So we don't see where the issue comes up in the first place, and why feminists need to make it their added burden, given the fact that they are already trying to make sure women are empowered, given the way the world is going right now. Do not take it. They talked about how fathers' rights need to be given. Then why not campaigning for themselves? We do not see straight people coming up and fighting for gay rights and lesbian rights. No, we do not. They have to form communities. They have to fight for their own rights to make sure that they can actually legalize marriage. So if you see that, so why do the feminists actually want to even go for such movement in the first place? And on a third level, how can we even ensure that so many feminists, with all their feminist theories in their mind, would actually even believe in this route of actually compromising their rights to try and make sure that, well, you know what, I'll fall into this false sense of security, that if I do give leeway and try to fight for father's rights, which I don't really need to, we would actually strengthen our position. No, we do not believe so. We do not think that all the feminists in the world will suddenly actually change their mindset and actually go out of their way to add further burden to the agenda and actually take the burden of proving father's rights where there is clearly not even an issue in the first place. Now, on the fourth corporate level, women already have their own concerns, Mr. Speaker, sir. They have gone many generations. We talk about in cultures, interdisciplinary works. We've seen how women have been given segregated roles. That we've seen how they've been discriminated over the years. So they've come a long way to try and make sure they try to change attitudes and beliefs towards them in the societies. So when they talk about establishing fathers' rights, we do not think that it is part of a feminist agenda because because bodily autonomy is exclusive in this case. Because let's not forget, please take your seats. Let's not forget, men do not have to bear the pain that women have to bear when they're actually when they have to give birth, when they have to carry their child, Mr. Speaker, sir. So in terms of that, you must understand that where is the justification in that? Women have to carry that burden, men don't. Women are already at a disadvantage. They're already having to go through that pain. So we do not see why the inheriting for fathers' rights to be established.
Fine, sir.
No, I'll take it back. Moving on to the key extension that the closing opposition is going to come up in this house today. Firstly, whether or not the feminists want to do this campaign or not in the first place. Secondly, whether or not it serves the purpose of the feminists that they have been trying to establish for all these years. Firstly, on my first extension, which is whether they want to do this campaign or not. Mr. Speaker, sir, let's not forget why did the feminists movement start? Because firstly, women did not get the basic rights. Let's not forget during the times when they had to carve a V in their chest because they wanted to vote, because they were not allowed those rights. So when they have these bigger agendas to fulfill, they're made for many generations to try and make sure women in India do not get burned just when their husbands die as well. We see these laws still existing. We see when a man dies, the women is expected to be burned with him. So when such notions are still existing in these cultures, and when feminists are trying through their movements to try and make sure these ideologies are being removed from society, we don't see how a father's right is suddenly becoming an inherent need there's an inherent need for fathers to become a part of the agenda, and why they would want to do this in the first place. So not take it. As I said during one of my rebuttal, is that feminists exist all over the world. Something that ties them together is the feminist theory. Now, you can't expect all feminists to actually work hand in hand in this. Because what happens is, say some feminists do take this route in trying to compromise for their rights and go for the father's rights, while other feminists don't. What happens is there's a disruption in the normal society. So we see a further division of opinions, Mr. Speaker. We see a division of feminist opinions as well. So we see a further hindrance in the feminist movement as well, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we don't see how it has any positive effect in the long run, or whether there's an inherent need to do so. Secondly, whether or not it serves the purpose of feminism, we do not think so, sir. Because, as I said, it has a severe detrimental effect. Because, firstly, we do not see how curbing of women's rights would actually further enhance for our father's rights, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because they have not clearly outlined, like, okay, you know what? If we do curb your rights, we will ensure that women do get their rights from now on. No, there has been no guarantee in that sense. So when there has been any sort of guarantee, and when we're seeing that in the status quo, women are going on the campaigns trying to campaign for women empowerment, why would they even want to take a step backwards and curb their rights to make sure of a right that has not even come up as an issue in this house today? So with all the steps that I have discussed in this house, we believe that the closing opposition takes this a bit. Thank you very much.
I thank you members of the opposition. I think to conclude, government is economic government.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, from the closing, we believe it is eminent that we should be protecting what needs to be protected and not give extra privilege to a certain amount of group only because we think that they are weaker, right? On the motion that this House believes that feminists should campaign for father's right. We completely support the motion from the closing. Now, the entire debate sort of has become turned into an abortion fiasco. That's what we believe. See, what's an insane dad is, or a husband is someone as a wife married who would not consider that the fact that this abortion issue can actually be a threat. I mean, this sort of issues need to be discussed, and are always up for discussion whenever there's a marriage, whenever there's a sort of understanding, right? So, we would like to say that why the question that we posing started asking is that why would the feminists give up their end of the right? See, we're saying that probably because it is morally wrong. The fact that it's more beneficial, it acts as a positive thing for the feminist cause itself, because of the hypocrisy that is involved in the feminist cause, right? Maybe because it will bring the men back to the dialogue, right? Maybe because it will soften down all the hard lines that the men are taking in this case, right? Or because as soon as the men will start seeing that they're fighting for a just cause, when they see that this is a matter of not equality, but a matter of equity, we believe that it will actually add more voice to the cause that the women are trying to pursue right now. See, the person started asking us to, what about the rights on the other particular issues? They pointed out rightly so that women are still being burned in India. We said that, ladies and gentlemen, that these rights can actually go hand in hand, right? Because when you start fighting for the other person's right, when you start advocating the rights of the men at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the other group will also be on board with your ideology as well, and this can actually work as a betterment for the women's rights and fighting and making the other party much better. See, we have also to consider the fact that we're talking on a developing nation. We're not talking about extreme cases like Saudi Arabia where women has no right to vote, or we're not talking about the Somalia where women are actually tied to the pole and stoned to death, right? We're talking about more liberal democracy here. We're talking about countries which are becoming much more progressive over time, right? Because here we see there is an opportunity of dialogue. We understand that there is a common ground between the father and the mother. So, in my from the closing, I'll be asking as my key class, I'll be asking some main questions. Is there a need to have father's right at this moment? And I'll also be asking that whether we have achieved the feminist agenda to the extent that we want to, right? Firstly, is there a need for father's right now? We say yes, because considering that a moderate society or a developing nation, like as my partners like to point out, rightly so, that we need to discuss on such issues that the opening has also talked about, such as pregnancy, conception, abortion. But the other thing that we've already brought down from our points, like the divorce. We always try to see that whenever issue of divorce comes in, it's the woman that gets more benefit, and we believe that is not right, because we try to perceive the woman is on the weaker side. So if the husband and the wife had a house of their own, the house would probably go to the wife, the children would go to the wife. We believe that shouldn't be the case. We believe that the feminist movement, if they start taking, or if they start giving a hand, if they start taking a hand and try to stand up and want the equal share rather than going for the more portion of the wealth, we believe that could actually be a problem for everyone else.
By saying that women are weaker, you're already accepting that men are dominating. So why would you allow the weaker side to fight for the dominating power which already exists?
Sir, we're not saying advocating any of these. All we're trying to say is that during divorce, you can actually have an equity there, right? You can actually have an equity 50%. There's a amount that needs to be divided up that can go both ways, right? Why should the woman be getting more benefit in this particular aspect? We just don't understand, right? We also understand the fact that there is a lack of relationship between the father and the child, as always, because of the sort of work or the work that keeps a man away from his child, right? So the child develops less of a relationship with the father. We believe that such stigma in society should be broken down, and we believe that women, if taken a more active role, can actually benefit this, right? We also believe that in the longer run, whenever we have an engagement issue, whenever you bring men to the table as well, or when they actually discuss the real hardline topics, right, it's actually cast down the views that we're trying to portray. Because we believe that right now the situation is on the rise, right? But there are still hardlines that we need to break down, and dialogue is the way to go, and engagement is the way forward. And the second issue, that have we achieved the feminist agenda to the extent that we want? Yes, again, we should say that yes, we have. Because in the developing nations, what we see is that women these days are taking the office. We see women going out of bounds, or the social paradigm or the social stigmas that are already placed against them. But we don't want to overdo it, right? Because today they have the voting rights, the freedom of choice to make or to call their own shots. Right? Because as basic, all we want for the woman is to have the basic human rights, and I believe that those are already there. We don't want to do anything excess, because excess doesn't mean anything better for women. And whenever we do excess, it basically becomes overkill, right? Because all we see and aggravates the men. That's what not only do they aggravate the entire the masculine society, this actually portrays them as a weaker sex, right? If today on a bus, if the seats for the women have to be reserved, what message does that send out? We don't want that. We believe that since they should be treated as human beings, so that they have an equal share. So what to sum up, what we have said today is that we have reached the extent where women's rights are always there, and the women's rights and the feminist movement actually has been able to achieve all those basic human rights required for a human being. We also show you as to why there needs to be a father's right, because we believe that through prolonged engagement with the masculine sex, this can actually be a better cause for the woman. And with that, we are very, very proud.
I kind of this remark. To conclude this debate, I don't want the opposition to conclude this debate and to announce this topic.
With the permission of the chair, ladies and gentlemen, from this, the fact all these four speakers from the government side today, they have conceived to the fact that women are weaker, women need more support in the society. They have accepted this. So from the Prime Minister's speech, we got evidence that we didn't understand that this debate was more about establishing the father's rights, or this debate was more advocating on the women's side, because all the four speakers debated more on the women's rights rather than focusing on the rights of the father region. The only right which the government side spoke about was, especially the opening call, because the closing call did not came about and talked about, discussed about any right. The only right which they discussed about, which was a big queen of the motion a bit, they discussed about was the right that the women have the right to abort the child, and the father does not have any consent about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not agree with it, because when we go to an hospital, when the women wants to undertake abortion, if the application form, the husband's signature is wanted, ladies and gentlemen. This is they have failed to understand. Sit down, sir, not now. You need to understand one thing, that this is not a bigger issue as they're making it look. Because at the end of the day, did we see fathers going to the street and protesting the children? We did not see it. So this issue doesn't look that bigger, ladies and gentlemen. Because they are assuming the fact that every woman aborts the child without the consent of the husband, ladies and gentlemen. We do not agree with that, ladies and gentlemen. Because in a marriage, the wife would obviously consult the husband when she does not want to take the baby, ladies and gentlemen. In some cases, it might happen that they might abort, but it does not happen. So no evidence shown by the government side that it is a bigger issue in this house today, ladies and gentlemen. So what we believe, that what we have talked about in this house today, we have talked about, so we have stated that even under the current status quo, women are weaker, ladies and gentlemen, and we believe that women are campaigning to establish their own right. Why women are still campaigning? Because they still believe that they are the weaker. We still live in a male chauvinist society, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that my speaker raised up the point that in Indian society, where in village areas and other areas, you have still men dominating the women, you have still you're still dominating the women and you're still cutting down the rights of the women when you're burning a particular lady when the husband dies and they are dominated at the end of the day. So we believe that under the current status quo, we do not see that women are upper than men in general. So we do not see that. So we believe that when we talked about that, you know what, when gays, they want to protect their own right, they protest themselves in general. We do not see straights going out to the streets and protecting the rights of the gay gentlemen. Similarly, even if we take this as a right, the right they have stated, we believe that the men should go onto the street and protest legitimate rather than the women of the legitimate. Because at the end of the day, you need to understand that society not taken, that the society is divided into different sections of women. Every woman does not have the same mentality. One woman might want to have this right, one woman might be behind giving away this right. So when you will see that different women, some women will be against the fact that other women are going onto the street and fighting for the rights of the men legitimate. So the society will be divided later. So we believe that at the end of the day, women will not agree with this. And this is not at all feasible because this is directly clashing with the rights of the women legitimate. Even if fathers believe that this is a problem and their wife is aborting the child without their consent, they might go to the court, they might inform the police about the legitimate. So we do not. Under the criminal justice system, you have laws present where the father can actually prevent if the wife wants to take care of it.
Sir, don't you think that the feminist cause has reached such a stage in modern times that it has achieved basic human rights for women? For it to remain relevant in the modern times, it must propel itself into other spheres that champion equal rights for both genders and hence fathers' rights.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do not see exactly, even if this right is protected, the right they have stated, how women in the society will be uplifted legitimately. We do not see that. Even if you protect this right, we do not see the women will be uplifted or their other rights will be protected. You need to understand, they are talking about, women need to advocate the rights of the men, and if they do so, men will respect them more. Why women have to give, why women will always be, will be given all the burden all the time? Do we see men going on to the streets and advocating the rights of the women? We do not see that. We see women are going on to the streets and they are advocating for their own rights. This is how the systems have worked, all over the past and even now in general. So it will clearly seem very unusual when you will see women going on to the street and advocating the rights of the men. At the end of the day, this is not feasible. How many women can you find at the end of the day who will actually go on the street and do it? Because even if it happens, it will not carry for a long time because you will not find a lot of women in the society who will actually support this religion. Yes, take it.
So you talked about other important rights to look forward right now, but we say that you can parallelly run both of these things, other rights and other rights that you're looking for, so that it just facilitates the achieving of other rights that you're looking for.
They have totally mischaracterized the entire thing. They again and again have failed to understand that why it would be so important to establish the right they have spoken about in general. Because this is, at the first place, we have talked about we have given you the point of bodily autonomy in general. We believe that that right should stay with the mother in general. And even if we consider that as a right in general, we do not see it, that particular right would be established in general. So we believe that first of all, this is not feasible. Second, women would not want to do it. And third, even if they want to do it, we do not see this as a very effective measure later. So what we have shown in this house today, we believe that women are still discriminated in this society. We believe that we live in a male chauvinist society and male are still dominating women, and we believe that even if it is a right, men should go and advocate for their own right rather than the women legitimate. We believe that will be more effective legitimate. With all stages will be solving
Guys, pastors are going to leave in 10 minutes of this. I can only that way. First, remember we can across. And thank you guys for your donation.